Matich, college football insider, analyst, and a guy who's been with us for a long time. Trevor, welcome back to the show. Let's go ahead and start with Coleyseakes' comments about his defense specifically, and him saying in a very telling way, it feels like they're not buying in to what we're trying to do. What do you make of those comments as we begin a very, very intriguing conversation here on the show?
First of all, I think that Coach Satake is doing what a leader needs to do. He's taking responsibility for things that really aren't his fault. He is out in front, being accountable and showing that example for others who need to be a whole lot more accountable than they've been, in my opinion. From a standpoint of those specific comments about the defense, when I heard them, I thought it was that he was talking to his defensive leadership and offensive leadership, that the leaders need to be more proactive, that the leaders need to be stronger. Because I didn't see on the field that the defense seemed like they didn't care. I thought that the defense just was running out of people from a standpoint of injuries. But what happens a lot of times when you get into that situation, the guys that are there, the leaders on defense will try to do too much. And they'll end up doing their job and try to do somebody else's job at the same time, which tends to open the gate. And that can lead to grumbling sometimes. These are all things that leadership in the locker room need to make sure doesn't happen before it ever gets to the level of the position coach, much less the head coach. And that's the impression I got when he said those things. The thing about Coach Satake, though, is I would play for him any day of the week. I think he has a chance, if he wants to be here for decades and impact generations of BYU football players. He's that kind of coach. He's that kind of man. And I think there are things that have kind of come to the surface that need to improve in the program, that have been exposed by this crucible of the first year in the Big 12, that he'll need to take care of. But I think he is the man to take care of those things. So now what he's doing is he's setting an example, a tone of accountability for everyone. And if anybody doesn't like it, they can either toughen up or they can pack their bags.
Trevor, let's focus on the game itself. What were your takeaways from the game on Saturday?
Well, that they kind of ran out of people. You know, the defense didn't have much of a chance. There was so much attrition on the defensive line that you had backups in the rotation that were now the starters. And they're okay. The problem then is that you had guys that weren't supposed to see a lot of playing time be key backups in the rotation, the new rotation. And so that ends up getting worn down, and that's a real problem. You've got attrition with injuries in the linebacker. The safeties have been epically injured as a group since before the season even started. And I think it has come back to really haunt the team over the last few weeks. And you could see that they were desperately trying to do something, anything, to stem the tide. But they just didn't have enough people in depth to be able to get it done. Offensively, boy, they ran the ball better, didn't they?
Yeah.
And this is against one of the best defenses in the Big 12. And they did. You could see the offensive line. They would bear down. They would fight. The running backs ran hard. There were still too many 0 to negative running plays. But at the same time, you saw a lot of improvement. I mean, 188 yards. Part of that, too, is you have a quarterback who can run, and that tends to stretch the defense a little bit, and that helps. But you saw the improvement there. The offensive problem is that from a combination of young quarterback and injuries in the receiving corps, frankly, you weren't able to get the passing game to work. And so, you weren't able to get the passing game to work. And so the combination of injuries on defense, injuries on offense, and the running game working, but the passing game not, meant that there wasn't a whole lot of opportunity to do a whole lot more than whatever happened in that game.
ESPN's Trevor Matich is with us on BYU Sports Nation. I think a lot of BYU fans and personnel, for that matter, are trying to figure out what changed after BYU went to 5-2. They had just beaten Texas Tech, and they're thinking, hey, one more, we're bowl eligible, maybe 7 wins is on the table. What happened from that point to where over the last 3 weeks, these games haven't even been competitive by halftime, Trevor? Now, and that's the most discouraging thing for the team. It's been largely over at halftime in the last 3 games. So what shifted from 5-2 after beating Texas Tech to where BYU sits now, scratching their heads?
I think it's that combination of guys trying to do too much combined with guys that were trying to do that did too little, right? You put that together, it's a problem. Like, for example, in this game, right, they were outmanned by Iowa State, and I think most of that was injuries. BYU had their full complement of starters, and Iowa State, their full complement of starters. That would have been a really competitive game. But look at the way the game started, right? It started with mistakes by BYU that had nothing to do with the opponent.
100%.
The opening kickoff, they fumble. BYU recovers it, but Iowa State punches it in. I check that. I take it back. They fumble. BYU recovers it. The next play is the interception.
Yeah.
And that interception, Retzloff had two guys open. The short route and then the intermediate route were both open, but he threw the ball in between those two guys under pressure, right? So that was just a physical mistake by Retzloff. So you have a fumble to start the game, then you have an interception on the first play. Then on the ensuing kickoff after Iowa State punched that interception in for a touchdown, they fumble that kickoff, right? And so that's three plays where the first three times they touched the ball, they either fumbled it or threw an interception.
Brutal.
Neither one of those were really caused by the defense, right? You might say the interception was because of the pressure, but it wasn't enough pressure for that ball to be where it was. So these are unforced errors from guys that I think are trying to do too much. Go back to the Kansas game. The very first run of the game was the young receiver, freshman receiver on an end around, and he didn't protect himself or the ball. He got hit hard, ball comes out, scoop and score, touchdown. Look at the first pass of the game against TCU. The receiver didn't run a flat route on a crossing route. He ended up on the same level as the defender. Quarterback's under pressure. He throws it out there. And instead of the receiver fighting to get back in front of the defender, he just sort of stops. And the defender's the one who's in front and catches the ball for a pick six. These are not forced by the opponent so much as they are mistakes by BYU. And that's when I come back to guys are either trying to do too much and therefore they're not doing their job enough, or they're not securing the basic fundamentals. Those two things together are a perfect storm against BYU, especially in this conference, because BYU needs to win by making sure first they don't lose it. You know, the old adage, more games are lost than they are won, right? Well, BYU typically doesn't beat itself. But guys have found a way to make plays that beat themselves that they then have to overcome as the game goes on. And the injuries are just too much to be able to do that.
So, Trevor, with 2 games remaining, you obviously have Oklahoma coming here, and then you wrap up the regular season in Stillwater against Oklahoma State, which, by the way, nobody saw them losing at UCF this weekend. But for BYU, with 2 games left, what are realistic expectations of improvement this late in the season?
Well, you have to define what improvement looks like. It would be, it's possible to win those games against Oklahoma and Oklahoma State. It would be a shock of shocks if they did, because of the state of the roster with the injuries. Where improvement needs to come is stop it with the plays that hurt the team. The basic fundamentals of securing the football, the basic fundamentals of doing what the quarterback expects you to do as a receiver, those things, the basic fundamentals of tackling securely when you are in position to tackle. These are things that they need to do correctly. Now, if they do that and they force Oklahoma and Oklahoma State to defeat them rather than open the gate, then you've got a situation where they have a chance to take advantage if those two teams make some mistakes of their own. That's where you need to define success. Does BYU do things that hurt themselves, or are they defeated by another team that just has better players right now? And there's no great sin to that.
Trevor, as BYU welcomes Oklahoma, and mind you, BYU is a 24-point underdog when that line opened up at home. I can't recall a time I've ever seen BYU that big of a home underdog, but I digress. I'm looking specifically at the quarterback position for the Cougars as they prepare for such a monumental challenge against Oklahoma. In your opinion, are you riding with Jake Retzloff after what you've seen in 2 weeks? Or if Keaton Slovis is healthy enough, do you roll your starter out there at the beginning of the season that, to his credit, got BYU to a 5-2 start, back out there for senior day against the Sooners?
I think that Slovis gives the team the best chance to win because he gives them the best chance to fully engage all of the skill people. And that's important. Nothing against Retzloff. He actually did a lot of great things, especially on the ground. I mean, you take away sacks, and he ran for I think 85 yards, and that helps a lot of things. Slovis is not the guy to do that, but at the same time, he is the guy to be able to distribute the ball well. I mean, Retzloff completed 10 of 27 passes. That's what, 31% or 30. It's in the 30s, and it wasn't all his fault. But at the same time, I think Slovis gives you the best chance to win. I also don't know what Retzloff's red shirt might look like, how many games he's played in. We know he's played in the last 2, but before that, what's the situation? So I don't know exactly what that means. I do know that Slovis has been a magnificent leader, and I think he has made things happen that probably shouldn't have happened in a positive way for BYU because of that leadership and because of his physical courage. And so I would pick him if it were up to me and it was those two. Now, I would be ready with Retzloff to go in because the problem is that you've got an Oklahoma defense coming up that can get after the passer. They're very aggressive. And one of the things you can say for Retzloff is that when the offensive line gets leaky, at least he can run around and make some things happen anyway, better than Slovis can do. Either way, Slovis, I think, can get the ball out of his hand quicker and make more things happen.
Trevor, it's always great to talk with you. We appreciate this segment every week. Matich Monday is a fan favorite for sure. And hey, fingers crossed for something good to happen on Senior Day. We'll roll out there and see what happens.
You know what? It can. And just, I want to say this to the fans, give this team a little bit of grace because they have had a lot of injuries and they've been trying to overcome those injuries and things have not turned out the way they wanted to. But they deserve some grace from the fans at this point because they're out there still fighting, and it hurts them more than it hurts any fan to see how this season has progressed.
Well said, Trevor. Thanks again for the time.
Thanks, Trevor.
All right. Thanks, guys.
ESPN's Trevor Matich, such a huge part of our show.